Hello, hello, hello. This is Dr. Troy.
And I'm Ben-Jamin Toy.
We're broadcasting from the Cohesion Culture headquarters in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina, where even when it rains, the sun still shines.
You're going to hear real-time stories from leaders confessing their most crucial or recent uh-oh experiences in business.
Learn what their uh-oh cost them, steps they took to fix it, and how they planned
to not do that one again.
Hello, cohesive leaders, and welcome to the Uh-Oh Cohesive Leaders podcast. I'm Trevor Crunelle. I'm sitting in today for Ben-Jamin Toy, and Dr. Troy is along co-hosting with me. I have been a part of the cohesive crew now for a couple of years, helping Dr. Troy and Ben-Jamin with their programs to build cohesiveness, and whether that be with emerging leaders in your culture. We do it by kayaking, hunts. It's a great platform to build cohesion. Dr. Troy, how are you this morning?
I am doing super duper. Thanks for asking, Trevor, but I bet I'm not nearly as good as our guest.
And speaking of our guest, we have with us this morning Aaron Trahan from Austin, Texas. His performance mindset coaching is the name of his business. We are privileged to have him with us this morning. And Aaron, how are you doing?
I'm fantastic. We're here in Austin. We got some cool weather finally, so no complaints on my side.
That's awesome. Aaron, as you might know, in our cohesive programs, we like to start off with some connections before content. So we like to get to know people and build a little relationship with them before we get into the meat of the subject. So in that manner, first question to you is, tell us something that is not on your resume or we wouldn't find out about you on social media.
Yeah, I would point to kind of how I really start and in my days, and something that I would say not a lot of people know about me, but it's an absolutely critical part of how I operate is I'm big into transcendental meditation. I've been meditating for several years now. It's kind of what keeps me grounded. You're not going to see this on social. You're not going to see this on my resume. And I would say probably even some of my closest friends don't know that I spend up to, anywhere between 35 to 45 minutes a day, practicing my TM practice.
How did you get into that? What prompted you to start doing that?
Yeah, it was really just looking for alternatives to balance out the hustle and bustle, the fast-paced environment that we're all in, and looking for ways to, how do I stay creative? How do I, remove the emotion, remove the ego, and make the best possible decisions? How do I stay focused? How do I stay present? And all arrows were pointing to this thing called meditation that can, really check all of those boxes. And through the years, I've experimented with different flavors of meditation, and until I became trained in Transcendental meditation was the one that just really registered and stuck with me and had by far and away the biggest impact. It kind of makes me a better me from a leadership standpoint, to a better husband, to a better dad. So it was one of those activities that I said, you know what, this has compounding returns. I'm going to keep doing this.
Aaron, it's really great that you talked about that, because oftentimes when we get into a leadership discussion, everyone is focused in the doing part, but there's such an opportunity and such a privilege to give you the chance to set your mind, or to reset your mind, to reset your mindset in some way. Can you just share maybe just one or two sentences as to how this type of meditation may be different than just me sitting and, I doing maybe my meditation is praying, something of that nature, like what makes this, that you said you could be trained in, what makes it different than other meditation?
Dr. Troy, you are breaking up. Did you get what he's asking, Aaron?
I think so. Yeah, I think he was asking kind of what in a few sentences kind of separates this from other things like kind of like praying or other things. And,
Right.
for me, it's really all around two things. It helps me stay present kind of in the moment. And so it avoids me from just operating emotionally, and I'm able to kind of cut through the noise to always find the signal. And then secondly is focus. I'm just a big believer, especially in leadership roles, that focus is a superpower. And the more that you can focus on the right things and be able to remove distractions and keep the main thing, it's just always been kind of a superpower to drive progress wherever it is in that area you want to see progress in. So for those two reasons, staying present, being focused is where I continue to see, the practice pay dividends for me.
Right. So another part of our connections would be, we like to hear about your identity. We're going to talk about your roles and what you do for work here in a few minutes. But first, tell us more about how you identify yourself, maybe some character traits, how friends or colleagues would describe you, or how you would like them to describe you. But give us a little more background there, please.
Yeah, I think when you would ask those around me to describe me, it kind of goes back to the question is, what is Aaron optimizing for? What's he always kind of striving for? And so for me, it's you're going to hear growth come up quite a bit. And that's growth in all areas of life, right? So I kind of like to think that I have three really important jobs. It's kind of running the business that I have, kind of working on my craft, but it's also in my personal life, being the best husband and father that I can be. So what that looks like for me is where am I optimizing? Where can I always find opportunities to grow? And so you're going to hear things like a focus on development. You're going to hear things like being very growth oriented. You're going to hear things like always looking for those areas to continuously improve. And back to making sure that I don't overstretch myself. I'm always looking for efficiency. And so I'm just a big believer in efficiency. So growth is good, but taking on too much to where you're not efficient or you're overstretched or your bandwidth is too fragmented in too many different areas. And so that's really what I'm all about, is balancing those two things. Is how do I grow? How do I continuously develop? How do I continue learning, but doing it in a way where I'm always more efficient and finding that leverage of generating better output with the same, if not fewer, number of inputs kind of going forward. And so I think that's really, if you were to put me in a package and put a bow on it, I think that's what you're going to find on the inside.
That's I love the growth mindset. That's right up my alley also. Would you say that as you were an emerging leader, how has your journey developed more? How have you developed in your growth mindset and through that journey?
Yeah, I would say it goes beyond growth. I would say it's much more closer to resembling a transformation. And in the spirit of this podcast, I think it's kind of all revolves around many, many different moments to find out the wrong ways to approach leadership, the wrong ways to approach growth, for me to be able to, over time, triage and double down on what's working and really take a hard look in the mirror to understand what's not working to kind of get to this point. So to more simply answer that, I think everything has changed. A lot of the things that I was doing as an emerging leader came with a lot of scars and a lot of hard lessons learned to say, yeah, this isn't going to work over the long term. This isn't sustainable. We're going to need to really optimize the approach here. And I don't think where I'm at today is anywhere close to the finish line. I think, yes, I'm much more optimized than I was as an emerging leader, but I always try to maintain that emerging leader type of mindset to say, I'm never not emerging. I want to continue to emerge, even from the position that I'm in today. And it just goes back to doubling down on that continuous improvement. It's not so much of what have I done in the past and much more about what more am I capable of, and making sure that I'm staying disciplined to forcing myself to answer my own question in that regard. So it's kind of like making sure that I stay an emerging leader regardless of what level I'm at.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to look at it. I've never thought of it in those terms, but you're right. I think if you keep that attitude of I'm still emerging, I'll always be emerging, that's going to keep you on point there. That's great.
That's right. That's right.
And we'll talk. I love how you brought into a little bit about the scars and bumps in the road, and we'll talk more specifically about one of those for you here in a minute. But
Sure.
that's great. So now tell us more about your role, as a performance mindset coach. Tell us what you're doing in that arena.
Yes, I like to really summarize this in looking at, my role is pretty simple when you look at the job description, and that is to help businesses and the leaders within those businesses get better at getting better, right? It's really applying the thing that is my ethos, that continuous improvement, finding out what more we are capable of, and really applying that to a systems-driven process to help businesses focus on optimizing the business to keep continuously improving. But as we all know, regardless of if you're a Fortune 500 company or just a garage startup, all businesses are made up of the same critical ingredient, and that's people. And so if the leaders and the people inside of the business are not able to scale themselves, they are not developing, then the business is not going to have a great chance to scale and develop if the people inside of it can't scale and develop. And so I like to think about those as kind of two sides of the same coin, and really showing up to be able to help from a business operating standpoint, as well as those individuals responsible for operating, really making sure that we're focused on continuous improvement and getting better at getting better.
What's your secret sauce for tying those together?
Yeah, for me, it's it's really a process of reverse engineering of all the mistakes that I've seen and personally made. I like to kind of think, I kind of introduce myself as a recovering corporate executive. And, fortunately for me, I was able to assume a leadership role at a very early age and have a significant amount of people and business responsibility at an early age. But all that really means is I've made a lot more mistakes than a lot of other people pretty quickly. And so as I reverse engineered my own journey and kind of looking for the common threads around what does businesses have to do to continue to grow and scale? And more importantly, what do businesses do that prevent them from continuing to grow and scale? And then really helping businesses simplify that. It does not mean that it's easy, but if we can show up with systems and a connection of different frameworks that take the randomness out of that and focus on a few of the key areas that will always matter most to a business continuing to grow and improve, is really the approach we take. We zoom in on a couple of key focus areas and then make sure we don't forget the people side of it. We're not just focused on the machine, right? People have to be inside the business and operate the machine. So also making sure that they are capable of continuing to look at their behaviors, look at the things that make them more and more effective leaders, because that's going to be the fuel that allows the machine to keep growing. And if those two things aren't aligned, you can have the best strategy in the world, but if you don't have the people capable to run it, or vice versa, you're always going to get really weaker than expected results from whatever strategy or goal or mission you have.
Right. Yeah, I think keeping that alignment can be difficult for businesses. And it's easy for one side or the other to get out of balance unless you're being intentional about keeping them aligned and balanced.
That's right. Yeah, I think you just brought up a really insightful point. It's like so many emerging leaders show up and want to go work for these businesses that they hope and have the intention of growing and scaling. But with the leaderships actually running the company, the leadership teams, is my job, that the way that I think about it is, how do we remove their effectiveness from just being random, from it just being up to them to continue to improve and focus on these key areas within the business what if there were systems that they could use to make the focus of that much simpler? And I think anytime we have a system to help steer and guide us, again, this doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be easy, but it does allow a system-driven approach that can make it much, much more simple, which dramatically increases the likelihood of great execution. So yeah, it's really removing the randomness out of this and taking a much more system driven approach.
Right. I love that. So let's give you the opportunity to share one of those moments that you had as a leader. Tell us.
Yeah. I kind of look back, and it was much more of a much more than an moment for me, and it was more of an era, I guess you could say. And as I mentioned, just having a lot of success early on in my career, I was an emerging leader that was emerging very, very rapidly. I was put in a lot of sink or swim type of moments, and luckily I learned how to swim pretty quickly. But you wake up, and I was a 30-year-old senior executive in charge of a billion-dollar publicly traded organization. And, life was pretty good. And I realized the hard way that the more successful that you become as an emerging leader, the harder that you have to fight against complacency. And that's where I found myself. My moment that kind of turned into a longer stretch than just a moment. My era was kind of looking in the rearview mirror, kind of thinking that I had it all figured out, looking at my track record of success and saying, yeah, I can coast now. I've got this under control. I'm as great as everybody kind of thinks I am, right? And within a blink of an eye, you really go out of the growth zone and fall into that comfort zone. And it took me almost a couple of years. I had to get some hard feedback, learned a couple hard lessons. And I think that more so than anything else, that era of uh-ohs really helped solidify the new trajectory that I put myself on that we've already mentioned, kind of what I'm about now, that learning and continuous development, because I was able to see the ugly side of success of what happens when you let complacency sneak in. I wasn't as sharp. I wasn't as strong of a leader. I wasn't helping those around me. I began to coast a little bit because the comfort zone started to look pretty damn comfortable at that point. And so it was a really, really valuable lesson on just how easy it is to slip into being in a complacent, just maintain the status quo mode. And without even knowing it, when you fall into that mode is the second that you stop growing and start declining. It may be very gradual, but make no mistake, you are in decline when that happens. And so that was the greatest learning experience that I've had in my career from what I call my era.
Right. What triggered that though? What made you realize that? Was it a particular event, or what brought that to light?
Yeah, I would say it was kind of a sequence of events. Obviously, I think we all know in the back of our minds with how we're showing up, with what we're putting in, we know when we're operating at near our full potential and when we're operating far below what we know we're potentially capable of doing. And so that started to eat away at me. I knew that I was kind of resting on the track record of success that I built. And I know I no longer had that same hunger. I no longer was operating at near that full potential. And then I started to see some of the business results start to slip. I started missing a lot more things. I didn't have kind of the command. I didn't have my arms around as many things as I did before. And so a lot more fire started to show up. I stopped, really seeing the growth of those around me. And then, really the point that really drove it home was getting some 360-degree feedback. And I have this feedback report still framed. I carry it around with me today, where it really shows these gaps and opportunities in a very, very vivid way. And for me, that was kind of the pinnacle of the sequence of those events that I mentioned, to now see it in the form of kind of key stakeholder feedback that really opened my eyes to saying, okay, I knew I wasn't performing at my highest level. here's the evidence of those around me that are also seeing it much more vividly than I am of me not performing at my highest level. That's when I knew it's time. It's time to get back in the growth mode. It's time to leave this comfort of complacency behind me and get back to being more comfortable, being uncomfortable, learning and growing.
Right. Well, I give you credit, taking that 360 report and internalizing it and acting on it. A lot of times you can take assessments like that or feedback and just kind of blow it off or try to rationalize it, and not do anything different about it. So
right.
That sounds like that was a pivotal moment for you. Maybe give us some of our emerging leaders might not understand what a 360 report is, and can you give us a little background on that and how you
Sure.
dug into it a little bit?
Sure. If you look, especially for an emerging leader, one of the biggest challenges that I think any leader, but most especially emerging leaders have, is the formation of blind spots, right? You may think you're operating in a certain way, but those around you are perceiving how you're operating very different than you may be perceiving how you're operating. And so the great thing about any form of 360-degree feedback is usually it's administered by a third unbiased party who comes in and really helps collect feedback from those that around you that are working most closely with you for them to share their interpretation, their feedback, their perception of you across a couple of different categories, to where you're able to see things and hear things that otherwise you may have not been able to see or hear in just ongoing conversations. And so it really gives you a great understanding that, perception is reality, right? Now you're able to vividly see the perception of others of you in a very fully transparent feedback loop that, really makes things very clear. And so I kind of like to joke around that for any leader, blind spots are like cigarettes, right? They will slowly kill you if you can't identify them. And the great thing I love about 360-degree feedback is it's a great way to really zoom out and understand what blind spots you have. And it shows up right there on paper for you, in a way that's much more dynamic than anything else. And so, for me, that was a big turning point to get out of my own head, get out of my own fake sense of reality, to really understand, how am I showing up? How is the way that I'm showing up impacting others? How do they see me as a leader? And some of the things that come out of any constructive feedback loop like that is you hear the things you need to hear, not just the things that you want to hear. And that's where the growth is, right? And so when you can really double down on those areas, it gives you a great blueprint, if you have a bias for action, to go solve for those things that on the other side make you a much better leader.
Right. And blind spots, we all have blind spots. But if you as a leader are not taking the initiative, doing those things you need to do to be able to identify those blind spots and then overcome them, like Aaron said, you're going to be stagnant. And I worked for my career 3 different Fortune 500 companies. I never had a 360-degree review. I didn't really even learn about them until I got into the coaching afterwards. And I know that was I just wish that someone during my career had said, we're going to do this for you. Or I had known enough to ask for one, or to kind of create my own, maybe, ask people around me for more feedback like that to use. So those can be very valuable. And I just want to stress that to our emerging leaders, that if you're not being given that opportunity, seek it out. I think it can be very helpful. What are your thoughts on that, Aaron?
Yeah, I think, Trevor, to your point, it's so incredibly valuable. If you are truly serious about growing as an emerging leader, there is no growth catalyst in going through this process. And let's also address the elephant in the room. It's very comfortable to not do it, right? Use me as the learning example. I was comfortable not going through a process like this. I had a great track record and resume and amazing results to show for it. But until I then got out of that, understanding that the world is not lived in the rearview mirror, the world is lived at the front windshield. How do I get better going forward? Not just resting on what I've done before. It takes a little bit of courage to get uncomfortable, because no one, I mean, we're all human. We're all going to have that reaction of hearing and learning about, in some cases, negative/constructive feedback around how we can get better. And so not only having the courage to go through that process, but then instead of getting defensive, instead of trying to explain it away, to then be able to say thank you. While I may not agree with all of this, this is absolutely the perception that others have. How can I change the controllables in my behavior that then shows up and translates into a changing of perception? And so you don't have to agree with everything, but you will always, 100% of the time, find some golden nuggets in there that were absolutely blind spots for you on the way that your leadership approach and behavior was being perceived by others.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and the other thing I think to keep in mind when you do receive feedback like that through an assessment is that it's not personal. People are giving that information to try to help you. And we all tend to, it's a natural reaction for us to take any of that personally. But you have to distance yourself from that and realize that this is what I need to make myself better and to grow.
Yeah. And who knows what doors of opportunity that opens. And to be fully transparent, one of the key areas that jumped out from my feedback assessment was jumping off the page screaming, I was a terrible people leader. I was very skilled in operations, very skilled in strategy, but it was not a very pleasurable experience working in one of my divisions, because I operated with an approach of, look, to be successful, keep up with me, do as I do, learn from me, just watch, right? I was very ill prepared to really nurture and develop those people around me. I was a young emerging leader. Look, we don't come out of college knowing how to lead people. We may know about concepts and frameworks and can understand strategy, but leading people is a very messy function, right? It takes some experience. We need some reps. And so it's kind of shocking that same report that I still walk around with in my backpack every single day, that's now 12 years old, was screaming about a weakness that I had that I now do as a full-time job on a full-time basis. And so over a 12-year period, you never know where a door of opportunity opens, because as I went to strengthen that weakness, I started to develop an interest, which emerged into a passion, which for me became a gravitational pull of saying, I now want to do this on a full-time basis, working with people, emerging leaders, executives, to help them get better. So if you'd have told me whenever I was reading that assessment for the first time, if I saw myself doing that same thing that my peers were telling me that I was not very good at, that would be a full-time job for me, 10 years into the future, I would say 0% chance. But here we are. So, when you lean into those type of things, you just never know the opportunity it creates when you go down that path to develop something that may be an opportunity or a weakness.
Right. I think one of the key points you made there too, Aaron, is that, you may be able to take a class in college on leadership, but reading it from a book can give you a good basis foundation to start from, but you got to go do it. You got to be in the trenches. And a lot of those lessons that I think most leaders will tell you they've learned have come the hard way from making one of those mistakes, realizing it, correcting it, and moving on. And that's just the natural progression, and it's okay. It's okay to make those mistakes, just learn from them.
I love what you just said, and it's kind of, I've been known to say this a time or two, and that's, leadership is a lot like swimming. You'll never get great at either one just by reading about it in books. Right. You have to get in the pool. You gotta swim. You gotta be in the arena, right? And you also can't do that by expecting perfection. there is no perfection in leadership. You're not going to be everybody's friend and favorite person every single day of the week when you're a leader. I think Steve Jobs put it very simply when he said, leadership you'll never make everyone happy, in the field of leadership. If you want to make everyone happy, go sell ice cream. Don't be a leader, because there's going to be tough decisions. There's going to be tough conversations. You're not going to get everything right. And Trevor, to the point that you made, you can't expect it to be just a linear up and to the right trajectory as a leader. Failure and moments are absolutely critical parts of the journey. They're not opposite of success in leadership. And so, yeah, you have to go through them. That's where all the learning and the experience reps come from. So as an emerging leader, you can't expect to be a great leader without those moments, without those eras, like in my case, where it's a bit more prolonged than you would like it to be. Think of it as a critical part of the journey. It's not the opposite of being successful.
Yeah, it's the journey, it's steps in the journey.
That's right.
Aaron, this was a great conversation. I wish we had time to continue, but we need to tie it up here. Thank you, though, for all your input and your wisdom and being vulnerable, sharing your moment with us. We appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So tell us now how our listeners can get a hold of you. What's on your plate right now? Do you have any new projects coming up? Anything you want to share with us about that?
Yeah, for me, I'm pretty easy to find. The two places I show up to the most will be on LinkedIn. So feel free to, and we can share the link. But yeah, my LinkedIn profile, I'm very active with engaging with the LinkedIn community, always trying to share, lessons that I've learned along the way that can hopefully save emerging leaders from acquiring the same scars. And then for more information, my website, which is performancemindsetcoaching.co. You'll learn even more tactically in the details around how I help leaders and businesses get better at getting better. And then something worth mentioning for your audience is really wanting to do something special in 2026, really go above and beyond. And so I have a couple of spots open where I'm offering, 6 months free with a 6-month engagement. So really getting able to work with me, over the next year for only the financial value of a 6-month term. So really looking for ways to give back and ways to generate value to a whole different level in 2026 than I've ever done before. So really looking to give back in a whole new meaningful way.
That's awesome. It's a privilege to be able to give back. I know that feeling well also, Aaron. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for your time today, for sharing with us. For the audience, reach out to Aaron. Find out more about what he's doing and how he can help you. And I'll end now as we end all of our cohesive programs. You don't have to know everything. You just need to be teachable.